it's pretty much saying like the problems that come with like only like viewing like having like one single deity. And so I was kind of just wondering, like, I think the question I put in the forum was like kind of like those troubles that come with only having like one deity and like kind of viewing religion as like monotheistic view. If like there are any problems with kind of like having that view, like in Afrofuturism as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. Is monotheism and Afrofuturism a problem?
Yeah, exactly.
Because of its focus on singularity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good question. And I'm gonna throw this to y'all real quick, but I'm gonna say something about it. This is one reason why process thought, especially, well, I would say like most strands of process thought that deal with ideas of God are very critical of this notion of singularity. Because even though Whitehead uses the word God, this is not to be taken as a monotheistic type of thing. You know, for Whitehead, when he uses the word God, he's really referring. And since somebody said it on the post, I forget which one, but Whitehead's really referring to a conceptual possibility of imagination and of what things can become. And some would say that for Whitehead, God is this conceptual realization of the best possible outcome. So this kind of evades a monotheism of sorts. You know, it really even evades a literal theism. Because if that's what God is, God doesn't have to be anything that actually exists, like this cup may exist. The idea of God exists for the purpose of valuation, as Whitehead might say. Well, God, I'm just summarizing what some might say. Well, God is this function in the universe that values what occurs. This can be as simply put as my judgment process for what happens, or I could even say that there is something outside of this that values the world. But the language in Whitehead is very, very open. And so, and process thought, once again, is very, very critical about these notions of, okay, well, it's this way or it's that way. The notion of ideas of divinity are this and that. This or that, because this is that for these types of ideas. So I would say that it really maps on Afrofuturism well, because it allows you the possibilities for humans to be these values that create and that reimagine and shape the world. You know, that's kind of one answer I give. I don't know what other people thought about that, about their views on that question about is monotheism and Afrofuturism compatible? Yeah. Or we can kind of circle around back to that. What are some other things that kind of came up in that reading that we thought need to be discussed in a forum, in a live forum? Some things that we couldn't necessarily dialogue with the best on board. Hey!
Hi.
There you are. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Wanted to talk more about spirit possession.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's great. What kind of struck you when you read that?
As like, if someone was reading this and they were buying into a lot of things, this might be a place where they were like, I'm not sure about the credibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or they might not understand.
Right. Right. Because if you're really saying that this is occurring, you know, there may be some questions asked. But let's back. What does, especially Coleman, what does Coleman mean when she's talking about spirit possession? What is she getting at? Because that's an important point of clarification.
I'm thinking like ancestor influence in the present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or just like communicating with the ancestors through supernatural means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because she also talks about like non-supernatural means, like just like talking to your like the people who are older than you and like recording their stories. So she just like covered both sides of the spectrum.
Right. See, and what you said is the key, because does this necessarily have to be a supernatural interaction with the ancestors for Coleman? It can be, but it doesn't have to be, because it can be as simple as talking to someone who is who is a foreparent who's still living, or it can be also as abstract, which is not necessarily supernatural, but it can be as abstract as saying, well, Martin Luther King in many ways influences what we do now. He's an ancestor we appeal to. So the way that Coleman works it out, those are possibilities. So this communicating with ancestors is not necessarily anything supernatural, even though it can be. And she's very Whiteheadian in that, because Whitehead lays out the schematic, but he also says, well, I don't know what's possible. So I want to create a framework that allows for possibility. So yeah. But this is a very, and she does her dissertation at Claremont Graduate University on this very thing, ancestors as a process concept. So yeah. So yeah, what does that mean to talk about ancestors and worshiping ancestors from those perspectives? It's pretty interesting. Some would say we do it all the time when we live, move, and breathe. We are our ancestors. This is a process concept. I mean, the past is the present. You never escape the past. Right now, you're looking at 15,000 times 50 times 1,000 more in the making. And I'm looking at the same when I look at you. The past is the present in Whiteheadian thought. And Coleman kind of works a lot. Like, how does that sort of idea kind of coalesce with Afrofuturism, the past being the present?
I feel like I may have said this before, but one time I was writing a story that was based on like the history of Elmina, and I came across. Have I said this before?
I think you have, but say it again. Go ahead.
Okay. So
Get on tape.
and I was looking up like the lineage of like the rulers, and there would be like a Kwa, and then like 2 generations later a Kwaija, which means Kwa's father, and then another 2 generations another Kwaija, and like it was like giving birth to, you want the son to be the, like you want the son of this person that you have called the father of Kwa to be the reincarnation of Kwa himself. It's like they are constantly trying to remake the founding ancestor in the lineage of rulers. So it's like you give birth to your grandfather. And so I just feel like in some African traditions, the past being the present is just like so intrinsic in terms of at least ancestorship or just like lineage, that it just, I mean, if it's already an Afro-presentist and Afro-historical thing, then it's easy enough to think of it as an Afrofuturist thing. And I'm also thinking about like my own family. Like I literally, my grandma is called Akotoa, and I live with her. She enjoys it very much because, you know, she never has to say my name. She just says namesake or like,
Right.
or like me or something. I don't know. But then it's a name, like I looked through, my grandma's sister is like the family historian. So she has all of these like colonial files of like, they like document like our family history on at least like her side of the family, and from like 1800 until like about her generation, because like my dad's generation and like mine haven't been recorded yet, but there's so many different versions of the name. We have an ancestor who was the first to have the name, and his name was Akuto, and he got this name because he was the first. He was born through a it's a long story, but he was born through a C-section, and um and so the name Akuto literally means fetched from or something like that. But like there's AKOTO and there's AKOTOA and there's AKOTOWA and there's AKOTOWAA and there's AKOTOAA and there's AKOTOA. It's just like you just look through the family history and it's just like from the first ancestor we have kept passing down this name because we seem to be trying to get back to that first ancestor. And so there are currently 4 of us living right now, myself, my grandma, and 2 other cousins with the same name. And I just thought it was very interesting. Like you just keep bringing the original ancestor back. Like it makes the past so difficult to forget because it's like you are it.
Right. You are it. That's basically a process concept that Coleman really gets at. You are the past. Yeah. No, that's actually a great way of saying it. And how does Afrofuturism and our understanding of it do just that? Maybe Womack helps us with that. Maybe Janelle Monáe, maybe Lupe, maybe Billy Woods helps us with that. Maybe how does that happen in Afrofuturism and our displays of it and what we know of it to be? How is the past the present? Which ties us into Sunrise. I don't want to get there quite yet, that's some really crazy, cool shit I want to think about with y'all. But how, which ties us right in the hip hop, but let me not get too far ahead of myself. But how does the past become the present? How is the past the present in Afrofuturist thought?
Oh, I have a thought about Afrofuturism and religion, but specifically Christianity. I feel like just as Akoto was explaining it, with a lot of African religions and cultures, it's easy to see that we are trying to constantly live through our ancestors, but I would say it's almost the same thing in Christianity, where there is the assumption that we are all from one family and we're all siblings and whatnot. And that, like you see that Christians still give like names of the apostles of people in the Bible to their children to kind of hopefully hope that they become or they embody that person. Like I'm from a religious family. All of us have apart from me, all of my siblings have religious. We have Daniel, we have Samuel, we have all of those.
How on earth did you end up
I know
escaping?
I was, but it's not like I escaped, because I was born on July 9th. In Catholicism, there are saints, and every day there is a saint that is celebrated. And on the day I was born, it was the day of Saint Amandine. And my parents were like, this is it. That's what my kid is going to be called, And there is that idea that Christianity still resonate, and Christ, and the whole idea that Christ is going to come back, and that Christ is with us throughout, so Christ has been there in the past, is with us now in spirit, and is going to come back. I don't know if that makes sense, but I was thinking about that.
No, that's actually a really good point. Well, what do y'all think? Because I have some thoughts on that, but I'm going to pass it to y'all real quick. What do y'all think about that? Of this thing coming up in Christianity. And what does that say about Christianity itself, the fact that this is done?
Is Christianity futuristic?
I think it is.
Then if it is, I guess it's okay to say that the concept of a monotheistic religion in Afrofuturism or futuristic concept is possible.
But that raises another question, which I want to get to in another way. Is Christianity monotheistic?
I'm not sure it is.
But let's talk about that because that opens up a whole different. Let's talk about that. Yeah. Well, what do y'all think? Is Christianity monotheistic?
Catholics don't act monotheistic.
What did Brandon say?
Catholics don't act monotheistic.
What do you mean?
All the saints, and they praying to all the saints and naming their kids after individual saints.
They don't pray to the saints.
I don't know. I'm Jewish.
Wait, but I thought they did pray, but like they do pray to like Mary and like.
It's not like in, at least in my language, the way it's translated in English, I feel like people are confused. In Kinyarwanda, it's not saying that we're praying to the saints or we're praying to the Virgin Mary. We're imploring her to.
You know, I feel like Rwandan Catholicism is different from everybody else's Catholicism because it's definitely different from Ghanaian Catholicism. Because I mean, when I visited, I was just like, "What are y'all doing? Y'all look like Pentecostal."
That's probably true. There is the whole idea that we don't, at least me growing up in a Catholic household, we did not pray to the saints. We did not pray to the apostles or whatnot. We just prayed to God, and the rest we implore them to intercede in our favor.
So like the saints would be more like ancestors than gods.
That's so much better than Italian.
Isn't like imploring kind of the basis of prayer though? Like in praying, like aren't you imploring God on your behalf?
We could stay here for like an hour or 2 hours.
Crisis. Sorry. I was just kind of confused about the difference.
Oh, me and you are confused together. Don't worry.
No, but I mean, I feel like they are literally, I don't know, first of all, there's like God, capital G, and like Satan in like the Bible. But there's also like God's small g and like demons. Because like there was something that Jesus was casting out. I mean, there was something there. And when I feel like there are like instances in the Old Testament where like I feel like there are literally passages where like prophets are talking like on behalf of capital G God, and they're saying like your small g gods can't do this, can't do that, can't do that. They're not necessarily saying that those small g gods don't exist, but they're like, well, they may be doing whatever they do, but then they're not doing what capital G does, or like maybe their powers are limited or something like that. I don't know, but I feel I mean, I really hesitate to call Christianity, at least the way I understand it, as monotheistic. Or maybe it depends on how you define God.
Let's start there. Let's start there. Now, especially since we're dealing with Christianity here, let's talk about how. Now, this is a separate question from the Hebrew Bible, which they're related, but this is in some ways a related but separate question. So when we say God in the Christian context, and there's several, what might we mean by that? And can we substantiate that the God that we describe is monotheistic? Now, keep in mind, I don't know if I've said this before, but keep in mind, Coleman is an elder in the AME African Methodist Episcopal Church. She also is a practitioner of Ifa. And she also engages in process theologies that in many ways go against monotheistic understanding. So she's doing all this at the same time. So what might a person like that, because the God she's giving you in making a way out of no way is in some ways a God that's shaped by some views of Christianity, but not only. Now, with that being said, when a person like her talks about God and Christianity, what might she mean?
She talks about like God as like the general like omnipresent and like being the highest form of power and like saving the world and like that whole idea, which I feel like is kind of like, from what I know, I'm not like religious, but like the general kind of idea of what I hear from different like monotheistic religions of what God is. Like it's not necessarily a person, but it's more of like an existence in itself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in some ways, yeah. It's very important that you bring up these omnis. You know, the three omnis that the process thinker, theologian, the process philosopher Charles Hartshorne says are actually theological mistakes. Omniscience. Omniscience is a mistake for him. Omnipotence is a mistake for him because of this notion of power. Now she does bring up these omnis, but process thought is very critical of the omnis. So for process thought, God is not all-knowing, neither is God all-powerful, but God is everywhere. And the reason she makes that move is because of one, the biggest thing, the problem of evil. Well, if the notion of God is all powerful and evil exists, you know, now Leibniz coins the term theodicy, which means an answer for how you reconcile God being a good God with the fact that there's evil in the world. Well, process thought says, well, look, God is not all powerful, so God really can't control anything that occurs. God lures the world. The idea of God in process thought lures the world to the best possible option. God is not also, in process thought, what Coleman's pulling from, God is not all-knowing either. Because for Hartshorne, especially in one of the, other than 7,000 books here, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was actually for our time. He says that, well, if you say that God is omniscient, then you in some sense could be implying that God knows the future, that God in some ways predetermines the future God knows, which is a logical contradiction. Could be. Some would say it's not. Some would say that it's possible that you can know the future without determining it. But for Hartshorne, it's too dangerous a slope to slip down. So he says no. So this is the sort of God that that a lot of the people across the street at Claremont School of Theology espouse. And because process thought as theology got pretty famous at Claremont School of Theology. And it's kind of, you know, John Cobb, Marjorie Suhaki, David Ray Griffin, these people, Angela Lubarsky, a lot of people like this have all came through Claremont, Catherine Keller, etc. So let me shut up because I want to pass this back to y'all. But in light of those notions, what might a Christian, is a Christian monotheism possible? As we may have thought about it before, and what does that have to do with Afrofuturism? I'm gonna say everything, but what do y'all think?
You broke up for a second when you asked the first part of the question. Could you repeat just that first part?
Yes. The first part of the question was, what does a process understanding of God that Coleman espouses how can I interface that with a Christian monotheism? Or the real question is, can I interface that with a Christian monotheism? Is it possible to? And how does that relate to Afrofuturism?
I think Christianity is a bad example for monotheism. Now that I think about it, because when I was learning in Bible study when I was young, right, they would teach us that God, like they would teach us, what is it? I can't figure out how to say it in English. Trinity, God's whatever, Trinity, right? They'll be like, there is God the Son, God the Father, and God the Holy Spirit. Already that, I think, makes God multiple things.
Bam.
So now that I think about it, I'm like, I don't know. How is that monotheist? Because we do pray to God the Son, Jesus Christ, God the Father, and the Holy Spirit that Jesus Christ left.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right.
And so I'm like, at the end of the day, it's not monotheistic.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Cannabis, the rapper Cannabis in this song, I know Zero, says it brilliantly. He says in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 26, God says, let me make man in our image. But hold up, who's we? If God was truly a single entity, that's not what he would say. So it's like, and then he goes through a whole thing on this. But yeah, this Trinity thing is really interesting. Great. Well, what do y'all think? Because I have a comment on that in a second. What do y'all think about this? And what are our ties to an Afrofuturist idea, which Sunrise even brings up?
I don't know a lot about Islam, but would Allah be considered would Islam be considered monotheistic?
Many would say yeah, depending on who you talk to. Many would. It's understood to be a monotheistic religion, sure. But then
The Trinity doesn't exist.
Pardon me?
So like the concepts of the Trinity doesn't exist.
No, in Islam, no.
Okay.
Or in Judaism.
Or in Judaism, correct.
Oh really? I didn't know that either.
Yeah. That's a Christian thing. Yeah.
Dang.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a scholar, I forget his first name, but his last name is Ogbanaya. And I forget what country he's from, but he does a dissertation on the Trinity and process thought. He basically says, well, the North African bishop who invented the Trinity, because you can't really find it in what we call the Bible. I mean, it comes from an interpretation of Tertullian, who was a bishop in North Africa. And Ogbanaya makes the argument that Tertullian structures the Trinity based on his understandings of polytheism. And he argues that the Trinity is a polytheism, and it's more a symbol of how we should interact in community, which is something that Karl Rahner kind of picks up in his work in the mid 20th century, when he makes a statement that both the immanent Trinity is the economic Trinity. He talks about how this is the symbol of relationship and how we should shape community. So he takes the whole thing and turns it into a metaphor. But Ogbanaya does say, well, look, you have to admit the polytheistic origins of this concept. And to say that it's one thing is just to be dishonest. And I'm kind of simplifying what he's doing in the book. It's a hard book to find, but it's really good. I think Howell has a copy of it. So whenever we get back here, if you're interested, check it out. But yeah, really, 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 really interesting stuff. But How does that connect to Afrofuturism? Because we're on an Afrofuturism class. How does that connect? I think it does.
I mean, I think that the community aspect that you're bringing in, like if we do take the Trinity as like a metaphor for community, I think that that's really interesting, because then like you don't have God as like this authority, right? Like you have God as like, I guess, like three separate things that are like upholding each other, which I think is like that idea of like supporting and caring and like for other people. And I think that sense of like equality between the three like is something that like goes against a lot of what like Western culture tends to espouse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this you have this top down as opposed to this interaction. You know, this community, this divine who inspires community, this divine who is community. Because some in process thought would even say, well, the divine is simply this idea, well, not simply, this simply complex idea of sacred interconnections, community, you know. So what if God is nothing more than interconnections between everything? You know, and this is in many ways a process notion too, which goes back to Sun Ra's notion of, which Sun Ra troubles a lot of stuff, as y'all saw in the reading, I'm sure. He troubles a lot of ideas about stability, about how we perceive the world to be and how we should perceive the world to be, you know, and putting things in a conversation that many people wouldn't say should be in conversation. That may be a definition of God as well, a process definition of God. It's certainly a definition of Whitehead's beauty, which is, yeah, it's a contrast. What makes something beautiful is two things that diverge in community and not necessarily trying to reduce the divergence, but being comfortable with it. That, I think, is an Afrofuturist notion too, especially when it comes to, and this is something that Coleman picks up on, especially when it comes to understanding what quote unquote Blackness is and what can be included in that, you know, which is a very Afrofuturist, because there are ways that Afrofuturists negotiate that are problematic for people who said, well, it has to be this or that, or this couldn't be considered Blackness because because it falls outside of this category. And Afrofuturists like Sunrise is asking the question, why? Why is that the case? Please.
I have a quick thought / question. Like, what's the if we're talking about Christianity, I'm just thinking like, what's the role of, I guess, Satan in all of this? Just because,
Good.
like, because like when you think of like monotheism and you think of like, I think of it like, I'm not really religious, but like my parents are, and I grew up in a very religious household, and when I think of
same here,
yeah, when I think of Christianity and like monotheism, I think of like this one power, like all powerful, but also kind of like intervening like in like worldly affairs, I guess.
right?
And like the way I think of Christianity, I feel as though people often attribute like the evil things that happen in the world with like Satan's doings, rather than like it being God, or like people talking about kind of like not letting like the devil in, or like not letting Satan like achieve A, B, or C. And so I'm just kind of like wondering, how does like Satan kind of play into this role of Christianity and this like connection, I guess, to Afrofuturism as well, if we're looking at it as kind of like these two like separate entities, with like it being God and Satan.
Right. That's a great question. Actually, let's switch into the next conversation, and I'll answer that, because this is going to cut off in a second. So, but that's coming up in a second. I'm switching over now. Did you all see the link? Is it up there?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. All right. I will see y'all in just a second.
Wait, is the link in the chat? Sorry,
Yeah,
a new
in the
link?
chat.
Yes.
in the Zoom group chat?
Yeah, it should be there.
And
If
is
not, I'll
Emma
just email it
interested?
to y'all in a second. But I'm looking at it right now. But maybe it's not. Let's see. Let's see. If not, I'll just resend.
What are we doing?
Well, we're switching to another chat. This one is going to end in a minute.
Oh,
So there should be a link to it.
I don't see anything in the group chat.
Really? Okay. Let me just email it to y'all. I'm sorry about that. I'm emailing it right now.
I think you might have to resend it in the group chat because I think only people who were here when you sent it initially like got it. So you have to just resend it.
Okay. Let's see. I just hold up. To everyone. Oh, I just sent one person. Okay.
Why are we
Oh, I
switching?
got it.
I mean, why are we switching?
Because on this version, I only have like 45 minutes per chat on this version.
Ooh.
Yeah. Something I did wrong. I don't know what, but this has never happened to me before on Zoom. Yeah.
Okay.
Give me this number. So
Yeah,
did it come up?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess let's see. We're still here, so I guess shit. But no, in case it does cut off, let's just go to that one.
All right.
So I'm switching over now.